Welcome back, all my subscribers. Today we're going to make a budget meal, but just because it's a budget meal don't mean we cannot have flavor in this. I'm going to make a pulled pork, and this particular pulled pork is actually a pork butt. You can use Boston butt, pork shoulder. It's all the same thing. And I paid $14.95 for this pork butt, and it was around close to 8 pounds. So to get it ready, I've already washed and dried this off. And so now I'm just gonna score it and poke some holes in it because we're gonna marinate this overnight. And the reason why you want to score the fat mainly is so that fat can render down when we put this on a smoker. So to get started, everything is scored, washed and dried. I'm going to use mustard as a binder, and the mustard is just going to help the seasoning bind to the meat. Don't worry about the taste. You will not taste the mustard, I promise. Now, if you don't want to use mustard because you don't like the smell or it's messy, you can use a little oil. You can use like olive oil or even a little vegetable or canola oil, just a thin layer. But when you're working with a cut of meat this size, you definitely need a binder on it to help your seasonings. Now for my seasonings, I'm going to be using Tony's Chachere's. It's a Cajun seasoning. And I also have some all-purpose seasoning as well that has some brown sugar, garlic, and other seasonings in it. And I'm also going to be using a garlic herb seasoning that has no salt in it. So on the garlic herb seasoning, of course, I'm going to use a little bit more because it does not have any extra salt. Now, generously season your meat. Do not be afraid. Again, this is almost 8 pounds of meat, and it's a thick cut, so we definitely want to season it generously on all sides. You're also going to notice as I season my meat, I'm not rubbing the seasoning in because that's actually going to pull the seasoning off the meat. So gently pat your seasoning in your meat. And if you notice, I'm flipping it to the side and seasoning as well. Another trick you can do when seasoning your meat is to kind of bring your seasoning up high, to get a more even seasoning on your meat. And again, you can use any seasoning that you want, but these are some seasonings combinations I wanted to try. And you can also, this is going to go on a smoker, but you can also do this in a slow cooker, or you can also do this in your oven. If you do it in your oven, you want low and slow. And I would suggest if you're cooking this in the oven to go 250 on your temperature to 300 until you reach around 180 to 190 degrees is what you want for a pulled pork of this size. And so now I'm going to wrap everything in foil, and we're going to put this in the refrigerator and let it marinate overnight. The longer you let this marinate, the better it's going to taste. Now, in this case, I'm going to double wrap my foil because, of course, it wasn't wide enough to fit over my meat. So the more wrapping you can put on this, the better, just to keep everything sealed in. Okay, so now it is the next day. And as you can see, the seasoning stuck well to my meat because we had a nice binder on it. So I'm going to place my hooks in my meat because this is going to be a barrel smoker we use. So we're gonna hang this meat till it reaches around 160 degrees. And as you can see, there's a side of my pork that didn't get seasoned very well. I'm actually going to season it as well. We want the seasoning all over this meat. So my smoker is ready, and I'm going to use some pecan wood chips just to give it a good smoky flavor to it. I like pecan as well as apple, cherry, any fruit wood you can use, or like a mild hardwood is what you want to use. But again, you can use whatever flavor you like. So I'm gonna hang this, and we'll come back and check the temperature on this in a little bit. So now we see we're getting a very nice color of bark on the outside of our meat. And I'm going to check my temperature. And you can see the temperature in the middle was around close to between 125 and 130. Your ends are going to cook a little bit differently as well, because the closer you are to the bone is going to be a little cooler on your meat. It's going to take a little longer. So at this point, my meat was around 160. So I'm actually going to wrap it at this point. And you can use a wrapping juice for your meat. For mine, I'm going to use apple juice as well as some beef broth mixed together. Just use whatever you have. You can use beef broth, chicken broth. Apple juice is going to give it a nice sort of a sweet flavor to it, but you won't taste it a whole lot in the meat, depending on how much you use. You just want to do that to add some moisture back to your meat. You can also use a little water if you want to. I would recommend you actually use some type of a broth or a fruit juice. You'll have much better flavor, but use what you have. Remember, this is a budget meal, so we're using what we have already. So once you do this, is we have our wrapping juice, so wrap the foil as tight as you can get it. And again, I'm going to double wrap mine just to make sure our juices stay in our meat, and we're going to get a better seal on our meat. Because of course, the more moist your meat is, the more tender it's going to taste. Okay, so back to the smoker. Our meat is gonna go. So now we're gonna let this stay on here another 2 hours or so. And at that point, we checked the temperature. My temperature was actually around 190 to 195. At that point, I just want to show you how it looks. Look at that nice bark on the outside of our pulled pork. And at this point, when your pulled pork is done, you want to let it sit in your foil for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Let the juices redistribute, including even if you're cooking it in the oven. At this point, my meat rested for several hours, and you can still see the smoke coming from it. And look how tender our pork is. Look how easy it's breaking apart. And our fat rendered down very nicely. And the pink you see in the meat is a smoke ring. That is the color that you want your pulled pork to be. That's a normal color. It is cooked correctly. And this actually did have 2 bones at the end, so it's even more tender towards your bone. But it just falls right apart in your mouth. And you can eat it like this, but I'm going to make some pulled pork sandwiches, and show you how that turned out. So here's our brioche buns toasted. We're going to put our meat, and I also chopped up some onion, and I have some jalapeno as well. Now you can make you a cabbage slaw for this. I didn't have the ingredients on hand, but I will show you that if you're interested in seeing that. But for now, we're just going to top it with some jalapeno and chopped onion, as well as barbecue sauce. That's how it looks. We'll see you in the next video.